Hello my friends, welcome back to A Common Touch of Fantasy. My name is Paul, thanks for joining me. And today I'm going over the things that I've read in the last couple weeks and also my productivity in the last few weeks, how I did as far as my time management. Also, I'm going to talk about what I want to read this coming week and also my plans and goals for this coming week. I'm going to try to do a weekly video this coming week, and just to see if I like it better than the bi-weekly video. So this time next Sunday, we should have a video covering this last week. So let's get right to it and talk about the things that I've read during the last 2 weeks. I finished 6 books. One of those books was from my TBR shelf. One of those was a library audiobook, and 4 of those books were library books. 33 hours of actual reading. If you watched the previous week's video, this is much lower than I wanted it to be. I'm going to talk about that more later. But first, let's go ahead and talk about some books that I've read. So, Wayne A. Wiegand, I'm not really sure how to pronounce his last name, wrote Part of Our Lives, A People's History of the American Public Library. This is basically a history told through the eyes of the individuals that went to libraries. So Wiegand went through a bunch of newspapers, diaries, journals, things of that nature to find quotes to talk about the library through different eras of U.S. history. So it went back to before we were founded as a country, when just certain individuals made basically clubs that allowed individuals in those clubs to borrow books that later turned into an actual library. Benjamin Franklin was one of the people that started that. He wanted to meet people, so he made this club, and the club then pooled some money to buy books, and they would share the books, and after some time that became one of the first lending libraries in America. And so it talked about each era of the library and the different things that was happening in the country at the time and how it impacted the library and how people thought about the library throughout the different eras. What I really got out of this was that throughout each era, we were making the same mistakes as the previous eras. You would think that the people working at the libraries would be on the forefront of inclusion, in the forefront of, not having, not limiting the books that are available to patrons. But there was so much censorship throughout the history of the library from the actual library that it just makes me realize that the people working in the libraries can make the same mistakes as the people from not working at the libraries, like from without. So a lot of times there was this dislike for literature, for novels, and the librarians thought that nonfiction was the only true type of reading. And then later on, it was specific fiction writers, and like the novel dime stories weren't really regarded very well. So the libraries just wouldn't capitulate to the people and the people's demands. And the main message that Wiegand is giving here is that the libraries are there for the public, and the public points the library towards the direction that the library is being used. So the books that the library is purchasing should be a direct reflection of the books that their patrons want. And this is very important. The services that the patrons need should be the services that the library gives. And when the libraries would fail was when the people in charge would not do what the public says to do. This was a decent book. It was very dry, but it was a good beginning look at the history of the library in America. The next thing I read was 1776 by David McCullough. This was a history book that I actually owned, and I'm very happy that I finally read it because I had this book on my shelf for over 5 years. And this is one of those history books that everyone talks about as one of the best history books, and it was very good. So this is following George Washington mostly during the Revolutionary War during the year 1776. So it goes over the siege of Boston. It goes into the attack on New York, and then it talks about the retreat of the Americans back to Trenton and Philadelphia, and the different issues that they came up with and how they overcame. What I really learned from this was that the people fighting for the Americans had basically nothing, and they still would put their lives on the line. Yes, there were a lot of deserters, but the individuals that made up the colonist army, the colonial army, were very poor. They hardly had shoes. They didn't have clean clothes. A lot of them wore the same clothes and outfits that they came to the army with. And by the time the war was over, their clothes were basically rags. And Washington just inspired these individuals so much that they wanted to serve him and do well. It was a great history book. I highly recommend it, and I think that I should read something else from David McCullough in the future. Deep Work by Cal Newport. This is the first book from Cal Newport that I read this last 2 weeks. Deep Work is all about the focus that you need to get things done, how to minimize distractions in your life, and to become a type of person that can sit down and do work and do it intentionally. It is basically intentional work. And I really enjoyed this. I watch Newport on many different YouTube videos or TED Talks, and he's on many of the podcasts that I listen to. And he's just a really intelligent, interesting guy, in my opinion. And I really wanted to hear his idea on how to get things done quicker in a smaller time frame and do it intensely, because that is one of the things that I really want to be able to do in my own life. Atomic Habits by James Clear. Tiny Changes, Remarkable Results. This was a fantastic book about habits and how to build habits and how to change your life one small step at a time. And it really showed me what I was doing wrong in my own life as far as making changes. And I'm going to talk about that more in a little bit. However, this was a really good book. I listened to this on the audiobook, and James Clear is really good at making sure that he references the people that he's taking information from. No other author that I've read so far on this particular productivity thing really referenced and gave credit to all the people that came before him. And he's basically saying, hey, all these people said all of this, but I'm adding just a little bit to it. And I loved that honesty. And that's why I liked his book so much, because it felt very genuine. It was a great read. I really enjoyed it. Fake News, Propaganda, and Plain Old Lies by Donald A. Barclay. How to find trustworthy information in the digital age. This was basically a preliminary beginning look at what fake news and propaganda is. And I liked this. The only problem I had with this was there were so many typos that it was hard to take it seriously. You're reading a book about fake news and the book has a ton of typos? I mean, come on, dude. Anyways, I have a better understanding now of why people fall for fake news, how we can watch out for fake news, and just be critical and more balanced when we get our news from different sources. I thought it was pretty good, and it's probably one of those things that I'm going to learn a lot about being a librarian in the future. And the last thing I read was the Cal Newport Digital Minimalism, Choosing a Focused Life in a Noisy World. Basically, this is taking social media, using the internet, and making sure that we're doing those things intentionally. We have a reason for doing what we're doing. We're not just mindlessly scrolling or mindlessly going up and down on our phones. We're not just mindlessly looking for the likes every 5 minutes or something. And the more and more that I'm reading about productivity and these type of books, the more and more I'm realizing how much social media really takes from our lives and how we can use it to enhance our lives without it taking away from our lives. And it's not about just like quitting all of social media. However, he does, say if you don't get a whole lot out of things, quitting is not a big deal. And I always had this fear that I was going to miss out, or this fear that I wasn't going to be close enough friends with people because I'm not on social media as much. And that might happen, but he makes the point that the relationships that are going to mean the most for you are going to be the ones that you have conversations with face to face, or you talk on the phone. Those are the conversations that we are craving, and we're trying to replace them with text conversations and text relationships. And we're just not created that way. For so many years, we were built for face-to-face communication. And now that we're trying to replace face-to-face communication with long-distance communication through text, it just doesn't meet the needs in our life. And this was a very good book that I really enjoyed. All right, let's look at some stats from the last couple weeks. Okay, so the top here is the last 2 weeks, and the bottom was the previous weeks. So as you can see, my reading was pretty much the same. Once again, my ideal amount of reading for 2 weeks would be 50 hours. However, 33 is not that bad. TV, movies, and games, I went down an hour to 18 hours, whereas last week was 19. My computer time went down to 15 hours from 22, which was fantastic. My phone time was about the same, around 8 hours, 7.5 hours. My exercise was a little bit lower, and this is the reason why I failed some of the stuff that I wanted to do the last couple weeks. I wanted to go to the library and study and really put in a lot of work. However, I just wasn't feeling well enough that first week. Not this last week, but the previous week. I've been having issues with vertigo, and when that happens, I have a really hard time reading at times. And I went to the library the day after I made the last week's video and spent like 5 hours there reading, and I just didn't enjoy it. I was being bothered by patrons and employees because they see me in that atmosphere, that place, and connect me to being someone that works there. So I can't really detach myself too much from that. So the idea of me actually going to the library and doing my studies, I'm not going to be able to do it because it's just, for one, it's too difficult on my body, and number two, people just associate me with working there, and it just doesn't work out. So when I do grad school in the fall, and also when I am reading and stuff, I'm mostly going to focus on my time at home and my atmosphere at home to make it the most optimal for what I'm doing. And I'm kind of disappointed about like how many hours of reading I did. As you can see, I only had 83 total hours, and that was mostly because I slept more. I definitely had about 120 hours of sleeping the last couple of weeks, which is good. However, because I wasn't feeling well, that was why I was sleeping more. I actually did more time with my family, and I had to work a little bit more. So that's why my total hours was down from the previous 2 weeks, which is fine. Like, those are things that are high value in my life that I'm okay with taking time from my leisure time. So as you can see, my old goals, my priority goal was 60 hours of studying. And this is what I'm going to talk about when it comes to the Atomic Habits book by James Clear. I am making too lofty of goals. I need to make my goals much smaller, much attainable, and prioritize specific goals. All of these things I failed. All of these things of my old goals I failed. And I'm tired of failing things because I'm making too lofty of goals. So my new goals for this coming week, just the 1 week, is 20 minutes of exercise each day at least. Read nonfiction for an hour at least. So if you were following me recently on Twitter or on my website, you know that during the month of March, I have this challenge where I'm going to exercise at least 20 minutes every day and read nonfiction for at least an hour every day. If I'm able to do this, I get to buy myself a book. And I'm going to buy that new Sean McGuire book, the In the Absent Dream or something of that nature, the book that goes with Every Heart a Doorway. If I'm able to go the whole month, I haven't bought a book since October, so I'm really excited about doing this. However, if I fail a day, I have to donate $10 for each day that I fail to my local library. So I have like some skin in the game on this, and this is something that I think I'm going to do because I'm really enjoying it. It's really motivating me to do what I need to do each day, and it's just those primary goals. So those two primary goals for basically the month of March is that. In the month of April, I'm probably going to add one more primary goal with those two to keep the habit stream going, because it's all about consecutively doing the same thing and habit stacking that ends up working in the future. Secondary goals are goals that I really want to do, which is weight lift 3 times this coming week, wake up at least by 7 every day. And what I'm going to try to do is 5 minutes each day waking up earlier, because I want to get back to my 6 a.m. schedule. And then read in the morning mostly, because I enjoy reading in the morning. And I think that with graduate school next fall, that I'm going to try to do intense, deep work in the morning so that I have my nights not to worry about stuff. And then my low value leisure time, which would be using social media or watching television or watching YouTube or being on the computer. I'm going to schedule that between 6 and 8 p.m. during the week. And I'm going to see how this goes. I like the idea of scheduling your leisure time. This was something I got from Cal Newport's books, that when you schedule your leisure time, you know that all the other times you're not supposed to do those specific things, but you're going to do those things during your leisure time that you already scheduled. It's much easier to schedule your leisure time than it is to schedule your work time. And my super ambitious goal that I probably won't do is read at least 3 hours a day in this coming week. And we'll see. I think I'm able to do that. I think that would be good. All right, so this coming week, I want to read The Dip by Seth Godin. It's just a little book. It's about when to quit and when to stick with things. So when you get into that lull of, productivity with something, should you quit it or should you push through, and how to distinguish between the two. I have this memoir by Paul Kalanithi, When Breath Becomes Air. I'm looking forward to reading that. and then The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg. And he is referenced a lot in the books that I just read, so I'm looking forward to reading that. So those are the things that I'm planning on reading this coming week. I'm also still listening to The 12 Rules for Life, An Antidote for Chaos by Peterson, which has been okay so far. And then I also have on audiobook Educated, that really popular memoir, and I'm looking forward to reading that. So this here is basically my ideal time management for the next week is 25 hours of reading, 7.5 hours of computer and television and game time, basically. Phone time 2.5 hours, and exercise 7.5 hours. So I consider reading and exercise the high value ways to spend my leisure time. That and writing are the high value leisure time things, and everything else is low leisure time that I'm going to try to compartmentalize into just the time frame between 6 and 8. Okay guys, I know this was a long one. Thanks for sticking with me, and thank you for listening. I appreciate it. Hopefully I'll make one of these next week and talk about how I did this last week and how amazing I did. But it's all about one step at a time, and I'm going to start trying to take things a little slower. Thanks for watching.